now time for the Billy C. Show, part of the BillyCBoxing.com network.
And we're coming to you live from the Billy C. Studios in Lake George, New York. I'm Bill Calogero. It's time for the Billy C. Show. Good morning, good day, good evening. Whenever you're watching, whenever you're listening, I hope you're doing okay today. Today's show is being brought to us in part by my book. That's right, Tom Molyneux, From Bondage, The Baddest Man on the Planet, is available right now where all good books are sold. And you can get a copy of this book right now while you're watching or listening to this very show. Just visit Amazon.com and punch in Tom Molyneux or punch in me, my name, Bill Calogero, and bring it right up. Today's show is also being brought to us in part by BillyCBoxing.com. Check it out. We put all the latest relative news in the sport of boxing, and then we take it off when it's no longer viable. So check it out, BillyCBoxing.com. You could also get the replays of this show. And you can get Dax Khan's column where he's putting some new stuff. So check it out, BillyCBoxing.com. And today's show is being brought to us in part by the New York State Boxing Hall of Fame induction and banquet ceremonies, which is going to be held on September 15th at Russo's on the Bay in Howard Beach, New York. And I'm inducted this year. I'm ecstatic about being a 2024 New York State Boxing Hall of Fame inductee, and I want you to come and celebrate with me. If it wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't even be there. So please make your plans today. Visit our website, BillyCBoxing.com, and click on the funny-looking banner of me that the infamous Jeremy C. made. And click that. You can get all information, how you can get there. If you want to do any kind of advertising in the program, but most important, be there. All right, coming up on today's show, we're actually kicking off a pretty cool new segment. We were talking about it in the past, and what we got going on is we're gonna do the lineage of the world heavyweight champions, and we're gonna start it with the first one, actually. Well, the first one with the more recent rules, the Marquis of Queensberry rules, and that man was John L. Sullivan. So Alex Pierpaoli is going to be stopping by and joining me with that. I'm looking forward to this. I think it's going to be real fun, and we'll get to learn about these fighters and a little bit what was going on in the boxing world during that time. But first and foremost, my main topic today is the fight. Now, I am going to break down and give you my predictions on the Tank Davis and Frank Martin fight, along with the David Benavidez. And there's also a cruiserweight fight that I'm pretty psyched about watching. That's going to be on Peacock. So I'll be getting to those a little later on the show. But the bottom line is, in my humble opinion, and you guys know that I'm an opinionated guy, I personally don't think that the Gervonta Tank Davis against Frank Martin, that fight is even worthy of a pay-per-view. I want to give a shout-out to my man Jesus, who's in the chat room. Hey, by the way, if you're watching or listening live, come on into the chat room on YouTube and check us out. For some reason, I guess the stream for Rumble isn't working. So I apologize for that. We'll get to the bottom of that at some point. But in any event, the bottom line is we're moving on forward as we are. So it is what it is, and I don't think that card is worth it at all. Neither is the supporting cast of characters. It's a typical PBC card. And I think it's the beginning of the end of PPC. That's just my opinion. I don't think it's worth it. Generally, I always pay for the pay-per-views because I like to talk about it here. I never and I mean this, I never do an illegal stream or anything like that. But I have no interest in paying for this. I don't even know how much it is. Even if it was $19, it's not worth it. All right. I recommend that no one buy the fight and check out the results in the morning because most likely you'll be able to get the highlights or even the full fight for nothing. So that's my opinion there. And curious about yours. We got Jesus in the chat room says he believes that Tank and Martin will do under 300,000 pay-per-view buys. I think you're being generous. And unless, I don't know what to tell you, but I don't think, listen, it isn't worth a nickel, in my opinion. He says, do we honestly believe that Al Heyman will permit Martin to pose a threat to Tank? No, Tank is a marketing scheme thus far. You know what? I think that the PBC fighters have proven to us that they're a bunch of frauds. Now, with that said, just hear me out. Tank Davis is a talented fighter. There's no question about it. I love Tank Davis. I love watching him fight. But I like seeing him fight meaningful fights. And when I break it down this fight later on, you'll see that Tank Martin, Tank Martin. Tank Davis has fought Tank Martin. Tank Davis has fought top-notch opposition. So, I mean, listen, we can't take that from him. I just think that the PBC in general is garbage. I spit on the PBC. And all you got to do is look at the Charlo brothers, Errol Spence, look what happened to him. And he gets a fast track. Don't even get me started on that. Real quick, we had a fight last week. I did terrible on my picks because Blair Cobbs beat Adrian Broner. Did you ever think in a million years that he would beat Broner? I certainly didn't. Hey, more power to Blair Cobbs. All of a sudden, everybody wants to fight him. Listen, the kid is still learning how to fight. I think it just proved and pointed out how terrible Adrian Broner and how far he has dropped. And actually, joining me right now, we'll get his thoughts. Don't go by the name that he's got on the screen because his name is Alex Pierpaoli. What's up, Alex?
Woo!
That's exactly what Blair Cobbs said. And, the thing is I know we were all pulling for him. I certainly was rooting for him, but I really didn't think he was going to have a chance. What's your thoughts on that?
I didn't get to see it, but I had a feeling that, Broner, it was up to Broner to show us whether or not he was cooked. And I think that he was in there against a guy that was dangerous enough that if he is cooked, he was going to get beat. And I think that's exactly what happened. From what I read, he looked lousy. You can't live the way it's rumored Adrian Broner was living and expect to compete with a professional prize fighter. And whatever Blair Cobbs is, he is dedicated to the life of a professional prize fighter. And I hope he gets a good fight out of this.
They're chomping at the bit to fight him now.
Yeah.
But hey, I just want to give a couple of comments. My man, Randy Gordon, is in the chat room, and he says, I love Gary Antoine Russell on the card. He's in response to my "this card is garbage," but he says Russell, in his opinion, is perhaps the best 140-pounder in there. My question is that fight worth the pay-per-view? I just look, you know what? In today's world especially, I look at it like this. The bottom line is we have a lot of boxing at our fingertips, okay, with the streaming services and everything else. And ultimately, hey, Alex, you could back me up on this. I predicted exactly what boxing was going to be as far as paying for the fights you like years ago. Because, I remember I was saying, I said, I predict that it's going to be. But the truth of the matter is if we're still going to have pay-per-views per se, even though you subscribe to DAZN and ESPN Plus, etc., they got to be exceptional cards. They can't be marginal cards, or a card that we used to watch typically on an HBO broadcast or something like that. And that's what I equate this particular card to. Not worth a pay-per-view. And it's unfortunate that the greed is involved with the pay-per-view thought process, because if they put it on a platform, let's say like the Zone, and it was available to all the subscribers, the amount of views and value that would come in would far exceed the money that they're going to make from a pay-per-view, and possibly set up a real pay-per-view card where people will actually shell out the coin, but we'll see what's going on. I got a question.
The Benavidez Vosdick card fight. I'm curious about that. So I'm still on the fence whether or not to buy it. But yeah, between Russell and Benavidez, and I do have some curiosity just to see how good Gervonta Davis looks. Because like we talked about a couple of weeks ago, the idea that that division is very exciting right now. There's a lot of options for him. I'd love to see Lomachenko versus Gervonta Davis. So I want to, because Lomachenko is still fresh in my mind, I'd like to see Davis to try to, imagine what they would look like if they fight each other. So I'm on the fence at this point to buy it. I guess there is a DAZN card on at the same time that you don't have to pay for. So I don't know.
Well, this is my whole point. First of all, let me address a couple of comments in the chat room. Jesus is asking what's going on with the Skull versus Canelo. From what I understand, they said they didn't want anything to do with it until His Excellency. Whoa! I'm throwing that word around now, Alex, with no problem. I had trouble with that.
Join the cult.
Yeah, all of a sudden, His Excellency, no problem. Why? How come I couldn't say that word? But in any event. Until he mentioned on the live broadcast that he was going to bring Crawford Canelo, all of a sudden Canelo wants to revisit that fight.
That's the thing. If he keeps putting on good fights, I'll call him whatever he wants.
Yeah, exactly. I'll wear the tablecloth that he wears. I'm always in the mood for a slice of pizza or something when I'm watching that with those Italian style tablecloth. They're going to probably send a hit squad over here. But the truth of the matter is look, that's how you do it. You set up, you get the juices going. You set up a mouth-watering preliminary, which is this weekend, and then you announce a big fight like Lomachenko against Tank Davis, like you suggest, and that's a pay-per-view. Jesus says the networks would rather pay and invest on TV rights for golf than boxing. Listen, and he says that shows you where we're at. I agree. That's sad. When they're throwing all this money around and boxing still gets kicked around, But anyway, listen, our new segment, let's get started with that. Well, did you hear Ryan Garcia got arrested? I'm sure you heard that whole story. Busting up the place and a hotel, and the guy, that's right, me and you were texting, and the guy who gave him the ride back to the hotel is the guy who dropped the dime on him. It just goes to show you don't trust anybody, but
well, it also says that the people around him are worried about him, are concerned about him, which
I think it was an Uber driver or something. He don't care.
Oh, if it was just, I thought like he worked for him, but if it was just an Uber driver, well, I mean, those Uber drivers can be very responsible people.
yeah, they tell you, hey, but yeah, I guess he's being evaluated. His mom is real sick, so not that I'm making excuses, but anyway, we're kicking off a really cool segment, boys and girls. What we're gonna do, Alex and I have decided, and I gotta give props where props are due. Adam Pollack, who has started writing these books, and I spoke to him several times. The first one I read was the Jack Johnson. He put out a couple of them. I'm a big Jack Johnson fan, and I spoke with Adam, and what his plan was to bang out these books in chronological order of the lineage of heavyweight champions, and he's been doing it. Right, he had a great one out of Jack Dempsey. I think I have it right over here. But that gave me the idea. Well, kinda. It was Adam's idea, but I figured we could do it on this show. That Alex and I could do the same thing, where we'll highlight a fighter, and we'll go down the order. And today we're going to kick off with John L. Sullivan. Now, I before I throw it over to Alex, I wanna mention a couple of things where we were at when John L. Sullivan became the heavyweight champion. Now, first of all, keep in mind that there were several sets of rules that we followed. First and foremost, the Broughton rules, which were, back in the day in the 1700s. Basically, all it said is you couldn't hit a man while he's down, and you couldn't gouge out his eyes. Everything else was free to go. They outlined the round, which was constituted by when there was a knockdown. So, of course, you guys know that boxing always finds loopholes. So when a guy is, half dead, the corner used to stand him up. The bell sounds, and then he falls down. Whoop, ended a round. That's why some of the rounds were an hour long, and some were, several seconds long. Then they came out with the London prize rules, which was a little more uniform, and followed that for I think almost 100 years, right? I think the London prize rules were around for a long time until we got to Queensberry, Marquess of Queensberry rules, which John L. Sullivan became the first heavyweight champion. And that's where we're starting, because we're still using those rules today. They've been modified a little bit here and there, but we're still using those rules today. Now, what was going on in bare knuckle boxing here in the States? Now, England was way ahead when we're talking about boxing and bare knuckles. The Queensberry rules started with the gloved, so that's a whole nother thing. Okay, but in England, they kept records, they had champions, all this stuff. In the U.S. during that time, they didn't really do as much in terms of keeping records. As a matter of fact, bare knuckle boxing was something like if me and Alex were having a beer in a pub and we started disagreeing on something, we decide to take it outside in the alley. Well, guess what? That's a bare knuckle contest that somebody kept track of. They were a little more serious about records and record keeping in England. When the Queensberry rules came into effect, that's when it all changed. And John L. Sullivan was our first world champion. And, I'll kick it over to you if you want to start, and I'll interrupt you like I usually do at any point. But before you start, I came across this thing. The most scary woman in the world. She won the most scary woman in the UK award in 1883. I don't know if you caught this. I saw it somewhere on social media. Hattie the Mad Hatter Matters. She, according to this UK award, was the only woman to ever hold the World Boxing Heavyweight Championship. She won the title in 1883 when she stopped Scottish pugilist Willie Wee Harris in the first round. She was a gentlewoman at heart, and later retired to Ireland, where she became a dairy farmer. And if you've seen any photos of her, I think the dairy farmer titles kind of suits her more. I wonder if there's any validity behind that. I did a little research. I couldn't find anything. The only person that came close to Wee Willie Harris that I was able to find was a musician. So that's an interesting thing that you can spend your free time on trying to track down, Alex.
Interesting. Yeah, I just did a quick search, and I did see the image you're talking about.
Well, I wouldn't want to mess with her, right?
No, I wouldn't mess with her either.
Yeah.
But yes, John L. Sullivan, John Lawrence Sullivan, born October 15th, 1858 in Roxbury, Massachusetts, which is basically a neighborhood of Boston. And this was the guy that, being the first heavyweight champion under the Marquis of Queensberry rules, he was sort of not only he's the one who kind of, if you think of the heavyweight championship not only as an athletic title or sports title, but also as a folkloric title, it's appropriate that this guy was the first. And he probably, because at the time he was one of the biggest stars on earth, most well-known humans on earth. He, like you said, he was not that big compared to these days. But back then they didn't have milk with hormones in it, and all kinds of training techniques, and food, genetically modified food by Monsanto and companies like that. So he was 5'10", 190 pounds. Picture, he wasn't exactly chiseled. So don't picture like one of the toughest, scariest guys at like a college keg party. That's what he looked like. You wouldn't want to mess with him. He got his start in one of those vaudeville shows at 18 years old. There was one of those contests where, a guy on stage was like, anybody that could go around with me, wins some money. So John L. rolled up his sleeves and went up there. He took one punch and then knocked the guy flat. So he had this very, strong farm strength, as you might say, Billy C.
Yep.
And he had this natural propensity for hurting people. And he had an atavistic style, maybe is a good way to explain it. However, if you think about it, boxing is a sweet science. So now remember that science is evolving. So he was definitely a more scientific boxer than the guys who came before him, but he would be like a troglodyte compared to Alexander Usyk today. So when we get to it, Jim Corbett beat him with science. So, that tends to happen. The more scientific guy comes in and beats his predecessor using the sweet science. But
and that's why just to jump off topic for a second, that's why I feel that we potentially have the best fighters of all time now because of that, Alex, because of what you just said. Except the well, I don't want to be careful with the words I choose, but they just don't have the heart of today is nothing like it was years ago. I mean, just not to jump to a heavyweight we're going to do in the future, but James Jeffries used to, withhold water from himself, thinking it was toughening him up. Would limit himself to one whole day of training nonstop, limit himself to one bottle, 1 quart of water. And we know today, that's not really a good idea. You could dehydrate and pass out. But
I think that's the thing that's interesting is that and it does make you wonder if a guy like John L. Sullivan had, 6 months to prepare for a fight against Alexander Usyk, and he could use today's diet, today's training methods. How would he do?
Right.
Because this is a guy who didn't have, he didn't have tempeh or lentils or quinoa on his training table. Has a big chunk of mutton or
mutton.
Beef.
I was just going to say he's eating mutton, the fattiest.
Yeah. So, he's not in terms of nutrition, and he was a big drinker. Now, of course, we know now that Mike Tyson did a lot of drinking.
What's a big drinker?
Yeah. So, and I think, there's a lot of athletes who do things that, like just taking, as you mentioned, Ryan Garcia, whatever we find out what, they claim it was a cross contamination of some supplement, but whatever, he was taking PEDs. So, I think that, it's an evolution when you think about what athletes put in their bodies today. And that is, it's hard to believe. And I remember us having this discussion a few years ago thinking, so are you saying that, or are we to think that a guy like Victor Ortiz could defeat, Henry Armstrong? If you think about it, athletes don't get worse, they get better. Now, I think those things are relative, but I think that the modern guys have an edge. Which is, it's hard to make my mouth even say a sentence like that of Armstrong versus Victor Ortiz. But, if you look at Olympic records, look at the Olympic records of the 1920s compared to the Olympic records of the 2020s, the modern athletes blow them away. So it's hard not to think that that would apply in boxing too.
Well, the last fight, I mean, if you look through John L. Sullivan's record, I mean, he's got a lot of fights, and it kind of backs up what we're saying, where they put it on his record, where he's fighting guys that were their pro debut. Could it be a guy that stood up in the arena and said, "I'll fight you, John L." And next thing you know, he's got a W. But the most significant fight, the changing of the guard, was the last fight under the London prize rules, prize ring rules. If you look up John L. Sullivan's record, you'll see that he's got a ton of fights, but a lot of those fights were bare knuckle, and they were under the London prize rules. The Kilrain fight was the last one, and this was a doozy, Alex. And you bring up the drinking thing, and this was something that I was amazed at when we were up at the Bare Knuckle Boxing Hall of Fame in Belfast, New York. Yeah, there's a Belfast, New York, and it's in the middle of nowhere. But that's where they brought John L. Sullivan to train. And we saw the the training facility that he had. It was sort of like a horse stall where they literally, and the chains were still there and the hidden compartments were still there. When he went on a binge drinking, this guy turned into probably meaner than he ever was in the ring. They literally tied him up in this horse stall, which was in this barn, which is up there. You can go see it. And he had a secret panel that he would stash booze in, that he would, when he was chained up, he would still get a little before he was totally dried out. His trainer, Muldoon, brought him up there specifically to keep him away from all the elements. But he must have been a mean drunk, Alex.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think, to paraphrase Rick James, alcohol is a hell of a drug.
Yeah.
And I think that, I think that it calls to mind like something from Curse of the Werewolf with Oliver Reed, the idea that he can become so dangerous he needs to be chained up. But yeah, when you think about it, that's one of those things that's crazy. New York, there's so many parts of New York where you're just driving, and then you see the sign that says Belfast, and it's like, could I have driven that far?
Yeah, I made a wrong turn somewhere. I should have made a right at Albuquerque.
Was there a bridge I crossed?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's the thing about him, was that he had that, and this fleshes out that folkloric element, is that he had the phrase, "I could lick any son of a bitch in the house," where he'd come into a hotel and smack the desk and offer up that challenge, and that anybody who could go around with him could get $500. And back then, I mean, think about it, this guy starts fighting, the Constitution is less than 100 years old, so this is a long time ago. The idea of winning $500 back then, that's just a mind-blowing amount of money. But nobody could do it, of course.
Right. But yeah, $500. It makes me think of the same thing about Molyneux. They gave him $500. I mean, what was that like in 1800? Yeah,
that's crazy money. And I think, speaking of Molyneux, that's one of the things that's certainly a knock on John L. Sullivan, is that he was one of the first to draw the color line. He was very explicit about, "I've never fought a Negro and I will never fight a Negro." So he didn't I wouldn't say he created, but he certainly abided by the color line, in that mixed race bouts were not something that was part of the heavyweight picture for a long time. And so black fighters were locked out of showing their true greatness.
Another thing is the rounds. If you check out some of the rounds, a lot of the fights weren't what we would call, championship rounds. I mean, some of them were only scheduled for 6 rounds. A lot of fights, during that era. But he pretty much dominated everybody during that time. And like you said, he was he was a I'll take one and give you one back kind of, sort of like the slapping thing, you know. And that's the way he was.
That's crazy. I've seen that. Yeah.
And that's the way he was. I got a photo of him right there. He did one of these. He would take a shot, and then his power must have been so outrageous that fights usually ended, or there was a lot of holding and grappling, and it ended as a draw or a no contest or something. But he was a pretty tough guy, because he, for example, in 1887, a year after I was born, he fought a guy named Patsy Cardiff. It was in January of 1887. And
I just thought that a year.
yeah, well, you're a little slow today, huh? But he broke his arm in that fight. Sullivan broke his left arm in the first round of his fight against Patsy Cardiff in 1887, and he went 6 rounds, and the outcome of the fight was a draw. You say to yourself today, first of all, would they permit, if a referee or a ringside physician knew that somebody had a broken limb, would they permit the fight to go on? I remember Usain Fagan was a fighter. I'm thinking he was fighting. I forget who he was fighting, but he was on the show a few times, and he stood up off the stool and his ankle broke or something right there, getting off the stool, and he I think he was fighting Amir Khan. For some reason, Amir Khan sticks in my head, but I could be wrong. But anyway, could you imagine fighting with a broken arm? Or we'll get to another guy down the road who fought with a rib sticking out. All the accounts are saying that his rib was sticking out of the side of his body. Yeah,
I think that's where, when you compare to today's fighters, you do have that question about real, like, their constitution and their, like, sort of mental toughness. Could they go on with situations like that? But we have, and again, this is a while ago, but remember, what was it, Antoine Eccles, I think, where Bernard Hopkins was knocked out of the ring, and remember, he dislocated his shoulder and he climbed back in and knocked Antoine Eccles out with the other hand. So we do have examples of that.
Well, he's a throwback.
Yes, right. And it's rare, but it does happen where you see these really just amazing kinds of effort.
Well, again, off topic, I'll never forget Mike Tyson, my man, the guy I love, this killer. And when he was fighting Buster Douglas, he got a severe cut, and that was the famous, I don't know what they had, a balloon. Remember they had the balloon,
yeah,
filled with water, and it was in ice, and Mike's got a pretty bad cut over his eye, and they're applying pressure on it, and Mike's in the corner going, oh
no, that was the Holyfield, right?
Oh, okay, all right,
yeah, and I think that was a good example, because he wasn't affected the night of Buster Douglas, but I think that was a good sign that his mental facilities were not with him, because you never see a fighter show pain like that. But that night he did, and look what happened 2 rounds later. He bites him. So
right, well, he was hungry, but
he wasn't in the zone.
The guy's got to eat. Come on. But the thing is, now they're selling marijuana gummy bears shaped like an ear. But anyway,
they look so delicious.
Yeah, you couldn't resist. But my point is that you see a guy, a boxer, that goes through training and the pain and the effort that you're going through, pushing yourself, and then to witness that. But anyway, back to John L. He dominated until he stepped in the ring, and this backs up what Alex was saying a little earlier. John L. Sullivan wasn't exactly the definition of the sweet science. Okay, maybe during his time, but there was a new guy in town that was dancing around and was showing boxing skill. And when he fought John L. Sullivan had no No answer for him, Alex, because John L. wanted to go punch for punch with you in the face because his greatest asset was being able to handle your punch and you not being able to handle his. But when he fought a guy like James Corbett, who kind of changed, and we'll get to that next time, but he kind of changed boxing with that true sweet science approach with the movement in the ring and his jab and getting out of harm's way. And if you've ever seen or read accounts of that fight, John L. Sullivan was extremely frustrated in that fight. But at the end of the day, he went and said the better man won tonight. I mean, it was an interesting changing of the guard, so to speak.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things about John L. Sullivan is that, he represented this transition period where the sport went from bare knuckle to gloves. And a guy like him, who's a very hard puncher, supported gloves, because that's the big thing that gloves do. People think, oh, well, you're wearing a glove, you're doing less damage. Well, the main part that you're doing less damage is not to the brain, but to the hands. Because if guys, especially heavy punchers, if fights were bare knuckle, a lot of them would end with broken eye sockets and broken hands. And which comes first? You don't know. Probably the hand, because the bones of the head are a lot harder than the little bones in the hand. So John L. Sullivan supported that transition to gloves, but right when it came to fighting a guy like James J. Corbett, that transition of style from the just stand there and slug, the sport changed to more, tapping, flurries, move away, jabbing, all those kind of things that Corbett was able to do. And John L. Sullivan wasn't as skilled with that. Footwork became a major part. And if you think about it, it's not like he went out like a sucker. That was still a hell of a fight. It went 21 rounds. So, the rounds were 3 minutes with the 1 minute rest that under the Marquis of Queensberry rules. But fights weren't capped at 12 rounds or 15 rounds. It was a while until that happened. For a while, they were
20.
You could have 20
25.
rounds. You could have 45 rounds. If you think about like Joe Gans and battling Nelson, that was a set for 40-round fight. So yeah, the time of the rounds was shorter. And that idea of a knockdown, it used to be that the round was when one guy went down, and then that was a round. But then it became where somebody was dropped, they are allowed to get up. The fighter scoring the knockdown could stand right there. Didn't have to go to the neutral corner. So there was a lot of changes in the sport. And Sullivan was there for, two of the big ones, which was the, the implication of the rules, application of the rules, as well as the gloves.
Well, the famous fight when they forced the fighter to go to the neutral corner was my man Jack Dempsey and Gene Tunney. That was the famous long count because of that. But
that was, like 30 years later.
Right. So John L. Sullivan was extremely successful. And the one thing that I want to point out is that when in his era and subsequently years continued that for years after his era, when you became the heavyweight champion of the world, and we do only have one world, so there was only one champion, you got to make your money, parading around the country as the world heavyweight champ. And they made a ton of money sitting, doing demonstrations, hitting a bag, just talking to people. And they would do the, like circus things and all of that stuff. And John L. Sullivan, when he won the title, he didn't fight again for quite a while because he was, making some money, and going around. Hey, the Corbett, there was a fictional movie about James Corbett, and I think it was called James Corbett. It's very close to nonfiction, but there was some blemishes like the love story part and everything. It's pretty cool because they show you the differences and the frustration that John L. had, and against Corbett, and then also at the end of how John L. Sullivan accepted it and never looked back. He went on to continue his drinking, and he was ringside for a lot of big fights in the future.
Yeah, and eventually he did become what the term of the day was, a teetotaler, and he came out against alcohol, and gave speeches around the country in support of, I think, even in support of prohibition, and he did some writing. You can find articles where he's commenting on the boxers of the day. And so, yeah, there was back then, it did seem like, especially a guy like him, there was a life after boxing for him. And it was, he stayed a celebrity. Of course,
it was Gentleman Jim.
Stories aren't as happy as an ending.
One of the chat room people corrected me. The movie was called Gentleman Jim.
Oh, okay.
It was pretty good. It's worth the watch.
Is it a silent movie?
No,
no. Oh, it's a talkie, so it's probably in the 30s then, huh?
Yeah, I believe. I'm trying to think. Who starred in it? It might have been Errol Flynn.
Oh.
Might have been Corbett, but in any event, he went on, but his liver was already shot. I think he was already given, "You're not going to be hanging around here too much longer," and that's when he decided to quit. I believe.
Yeah, you're right. Gentleman Jim, 1942. Errol Flynn.
Yeah, Errol Flynn. It was an interesting fight. I mean, an interesting movie. But in any event, John L. Sullivan, he was ringside for Jack Johnson several times, wasn't he?
I believe so, and I think he was even in the ring
for the Jeffries fight. Definitely.
Yes, yeah, you're right. And him and Corbett became friends afterwards. He was definitely sort of an ambassador for the sport in that sense. In that he hung around the sport like fighters tend to now.
Well, he was still very popular.
Yeah,
I mean, despite just like the fighters of today that may not be example citizens, the fans always loved them, and the fans always loved John L. too.
Right, and I think the other thing I didn't know about this, I just saw this on Wikipedia, that when he died of a heart attack in 1918, it was February, so it was in the winter, and he was buried. In order to dig the hole, they had to blow up the ground with dynamite. And one of his pallbearers said, "Old John L. would have approved."
Well, he did pass away, and if you, of course, unfortunately, we all got it. But if you've ever seen photos of him, later on in his life at these fights that we're talking about, he looked ancient. It's like the image that I have of Joe Louis. The last time he was alive, in that cowboy hat in the wheelchair at a fight in Las Vegas, and I'm looking at him, I'm saying, God, what is he, 80 years old? The guy died. He was in his early. I think I'm as old as he was. And John L. Sullivan wasn't even 60. Alex, he died at 59 years old.
Wow, that's sad.
Yeah. Well,
yeah. Well, and I think that that does. I mean, it was, we didn't have medicine like we do now, but also I think, if there's years of alcoholism in there,
and mutton and
it shortens life. Yeah.
I mean, the guy was eating, meat. I mean, a lot of these guys, that's what, their meal of choice was always a big rare steak or something, I mean, they're not vegans.
Right. It's
They're
like
not veg-
it reminds me of the old SNL commercial with John Belushi there, where he's like, little chocolate donuts have been part of my training table since I was a kid.
yeah,
And he's the Olympic athlete, but that's what he eats is little chocolate donuts.
yeah.
And he's smoking the cigarette.
I still loved him as no Coke, just Pepsi. But anyway, cutting stuff in half, the samurai. But in any event, yeah, John L. Sullivan, he changed the sport of boxing, and as you're going to see as we move on with this segment, that it just got better and better and better. A sad note about John L., which is also something that we hear too often in the sport of boxing. He died with nothing. He had $10 in his pocket, which I mean, give him credit. In during that time, $10 was worth a little under $200 today. So I mean, he had $200 in his pocket, and his whole estate was worth under $4,000.
Wow.
3,675 to be exact. So I'm wondering who forked over the money to blast his hole for the grave,
Yeah, really. Wow.
But it's a shame that, you see this and that the story ends this way. And you're going to see that it ends this way a lot. And one side note I want to add, Alex, before you have any closing comments on John L. Sullivan is, this is a part of the sport of boxing, in my opinion, which is like no other sport. And I believe that fans, and especially boxers, fighters, like Mike Tyson did it, should learn the history of the sport. Learn about, they don't have to go in detail and learn about everyone, because there's thousands of fighters that were out there that you never even heard of that made a significant contribution to the sport of boxing. But, I do believe that, fighters and fight fans should know the history and the impact that John L. Sullivan made on the sport of boxing, got it going in the direction that it is, to where it ended up today. And as you'll see with James Corbett, same thing. It was an era. So John L. Sullivan basically took an era that was already happening, and they fine-tuned it a little bit, put a little fluff and stuff on there, and became more civilized with the gloves and the round, with the time limit on the rounds and all of that. And then you'll see with Corbett, it takes it a step further with, the scientific approach of boxing, similar to, what boxing evolved from was, what did they call that with the swords?
Fencing.
Broughton, the father of boxing, was a fencer. He used to teach fencing. And, at some point, that's when boxing became boxing. It was basically a stem from that, even though they've found some drawings from Egyptian times of boxes. I'll never forget the one I saw where they had two combatants, and they only had one glove on each. And this was back in, it was on an Egyptian pyramid wall or something, some kind of painting. But I thought that was interesting. I wonder what the concept with that was. Blocking.
Yeah, and I think the ancient Greeks boxed as well. There's the statue, the pugilist at rest. I believe he was either Greek or Roman. I forget now, but I think his name was Theogenes. And the statue's very impressive. And actually, I went to the Met in New York City last July, and there's another statue there. So boxing was around, like it was an event in the first Olympics. I think little boys were taught how to box on the island of Santorini, the Greek island of Santorini. So now the rules, of course, the modern rules started with the Marquis of Queensberry, but some form, and even in the gladiator days, some gladiators wore what was called a cestus, which was like a glove. Sometimes it had spikes on it or little like metal iron studs, which I'd hate to be hit with that.
Well, like Mad Max.
Of course,
Mad
those
Max,
fights, right. Of course, those fights were to the death.
Harley Davidson riders, those kind of gloves.
Right.
But John L. Sullivan had a career, which is there are some conflicting records with John L. Sullivan. I know the Hall of Fame has him listed with a little more or whatever, but BoxRec has him 38 wins, 32 by knockout, only one loss, and that was at the hands of Corbett. And I believe the Hall of Fame has him listed at I believe 47 fights, if I recall correctly.
And from what I saw, I think he was only down twice in his career. Once against a guy named Charlie Mitchell, and then in that final fight with Jim Corbett.
Well, Charlie Mitchell was I remember hearing that name. He was a badass, that Charlie Mitchell, and in the bare knuckle times, he was a bare knuckle. I don't know. Was he down with? Did he fight him in a glove?
Well, it was 1883, and according to BoxRec, John L. Sullivan outweighed him by 40 pounds. Mitchell only weighed 150, and John L. Sullivan weighed 190 at the time they fought.
Well, weight didn't mean anything back in those days.
This is at MSG. May 14th, 1883, which that's just an insane weight advantage.
My senior year in high school. But anyway,
that was the year of your prom.
Yeah. John L. Sullivan, former world heavyweight champion, boxing hall, the first world heavyweight champion, by today's rules, and Hall of Famer. And hey, you know what? It all started with him. And as we move on with this series, we'll keep it going. So hopefully you guys will like that. And the longer we go, and we are going to break off. We're not just going to deal with the linear. So when the title starts to be feathered off, we'll follow that too. So maybe we'll get my man Ray on when he had his WBO title and all that stuff. But any event, did you have any final things you wanted to add about John L.?
No, I mean, I think that idea that he's definitely one of the immortals of the sport, and he was in the when the International Box Hall of Fame opened in 1990, he was in the very first class.
Well, he definitely deserved that. But all right, couple fights this weekend, Alex. I'll start off with the David Benavidez going against Alexander Godzik.
I think it's Vodzik. I don't think you pronounce the G.
Oh, it's a G. It's a V with the silent G with the
it's because it's the Cyrillic alphabet because he's Russian. Right?
Whoa! I can hardly handle the American alphabet. But, anyway, David Benavidez. So
he's not Russian. My bad. He's Ukrainian.
Okay, well, at one point it was. I better not say that. But but
that's what they're killing each other.
Right. Why wasn't it the Soviet Union at one time? But in any event, okay. So my topic today was, should you buy this card? And they're talking about it being $70. I mean, if it was a $49.95, maybe I'd do it. But $70, Tank Davis. Boy. I'm sorry, it's not worth it. As much as this fight between Vodzadik and David Benavidez is an interesting fight because it's the first time that David Benavidez is going to light heavyweight. I believe it's going to be his final home. I can't see him going back to super middleweight. I do not see Canelo Alvarez fighting him. He does hold the interim WBC World Super Middleweight title, but we'll see. He's taken on Alexander Vodzik, And David Benavidez, he's got 28 fights under his belt. He's only 27 years old, which is what I love about this guy. 28-0, 24 knockouts. Like I mentioned, he's a WBC interim world super middleweight champ. Canelo won't fight him, so it's going to be interesting what Mr. Sullivan does with that belt. And I think it's more interesting that the WBC put the interim light heavyweight title on the line for this particular fight. That's happening on Saturday. He's got 136 rounds, 24 more rounds as a pro than his opponent. He's, like I said, 27 years old. His last 8 fights, if you look at his last 8 fights, he's 8-0 with 7 knockouts, and they're all against quality opposition, including Alex Pierpaoli's idol, Demetrius Andrade. He beat him. I saw something somewhere that says Demetrius is still undefeated. I'm saying, wait a minute, didn't he get knocked out? Wasn't he pummeled? Yeah, he was pummeled by David Benavidez in November of last year. He beat Khalid Plant, David Lemieux moving up, Kyron Davis, which was also a decent fighter, Ronald Ellis, and Alexis Angulo, and of course Anthony Durrell. Those were all his last 8 fights. So he's fought some decent opposition. He goes up against Alexander Vadzik, who is 10 years older at 37. The height is the same, 6'2", but Vadzik has the 1-inch reach advantage, which I'm not sure is going to make a difference. He's 20 wins, 1 loss. His 1 loss came at the hands of Artur Beterbiev, in which he was knocked out. Yeah, in the right division, right, in the same division. 16 knockouts of his 20 wins. Now, like I said, David Benavidez is the interim champ, so the other sanctioning bodies don't recognize him, but the computer says he's the number 2 super middleweight in the world. Well, everything with Vadzik is all based on light heavyweight. The computer has him at number 5 in the world. WBC has him at number 2. IBF has him at number 5, and he's not rated in the WBA or WBO. His best wins of his career, Ngambu, he beat back in 2019. Adonis Stevenson, he beat in 2018. And Unietsky Gonzalez, he beat in 2017. And Isaac Chilimba, he beat in 2016. If you notice one thing about all those wins, they're all kind of a long time ago. His last several fights were against not so great opposition. What do you think about this fight? Who's your prediction of winning, as if I didn't know?
It's kind of tough because there's that gap there after the Beterbiev defeat. Vadzik is definitely,
it's a good test.
It definitely is. He's probably the best guy Benavidez has fought, certainly at light heavyweight. I think it's his first fight at light heavyweight.
It is. It's his first fight.
So I think
and it's for a title.
Yeah, I think, but the fact that he was knocked out by Beterbiev and then didn't fight for 3 years or almost 3 years, that certainly didn't help him. It was legitimately, or maybe 4 years actually, from October of 2019. He didn't fight again until February of 2023. He's fought 3 times, all knockouts since then. But like you said, not exactly against world beaters. I think that it's, like you said, it's a good test. I'm going to lean towards Benavidez because of the youth and he's the wolf climbing the hill, and I think he's a big, strong guy. So I don't think the fact that he's moving up is going to be a major factor. Right now, Vadzik is ranked 7th by the Transnational Boxing Rankings Board, which is the rankings that I prefer. So it's not like he's fighting the best in the division. The best in the division between Bivol and Beterbiev, I lean towards Beterbiev. Beterbiev was in there with Vadzik and stopped him. So I don't know. I'm going to lean towards Benavidez, and I think I like it by knockout. But I think this is the fight that makes me want to buy the card. And I
For
think
$70.
yeah, if it wasn't $70, I
Right.
think I would, like you said, if it was $20 less, I think I'd have no problem doing it. But $70 after all the cards we've had over the last month and a half.
I know, and some of them were cheaper.
Yeah.
You know, and this card is, I mean, like my man Randy said, I mean, yeah, okay, you know, Russell's on that card.
The thing that upset me was I didn't realize the 5 versus 5 was going to be a pay-per-view too.
I don't have any problem with that. That was a good.
That ended up being worth the money, I thought. And God, can you imagine being there, Billy C? That went till 3 o'clock in the morning. After it was almost 4 in the morning by the time it was over. And there's no alcohol, so you're not going to fall asleep. But I mean, did you notice there's like a Dunkin' Donuts in that Saudi Arabia arena in the background? In one of the shots I saw Dunkin', and so I'm like, they're all banging down coffee.
I'm so torn with that. I would love to go there and witness and experience that, but then again,
a lot of pretty girls in pants.
Yeah, well, I guess you got to assume they are, but
pants and long sleeve shirts.
Yeah, but the thing is it is Saudi Arabia. They're not too crazy about Americans. I don't know, but anyway, I'm with you. I'm picking Benavidez in that fight as well. I think that Benavidez. I don't think that there's any surprise in this fight. I think Vadzetic is been selected for a reason, and they're throwing the interim title on the line to give Benavidez a little side present, because maybe he's enticed to leave the super midweight division so Canelo can continue ducking him. But Canelo's going to either have to retire or start fighting some of these guys. But anyway, the next fight, Frank Martin going up against Gervonta Davis. And Frank Martin, you know, he's saying all the right things. And I have some quotes from him. I know we're going over, but I got some quotes from him. He says, I feel like this is one of those moments where all the hard work I put in is going to pay off. With all the work I've been putting in leading up to this fight and all the work we've put in over the years, this just feels like a life-changing moment. It's my time to come out on top. I just need to be composed. I got to be calm. I got to be who I am. I can't let any of the antics or the crowd or the noise get in the way of my victory. I feel like it's going to be a good fight. We all know what Tank brings, but a lot of guys don't know what I bring. They know a little bit, but they don't know the full arsenal I have. We know Tank's explosive and fast. He's got it all, but on fight night, we'll see what I got. So it's going to be two dogs in there locking it up like pit bulls. The best man will win the night. And he believes in himself, and he also expects Gervonta Davis to come out and be his best self. So we'll see about that. Speaking of Gervonta, Tank Davis, he's the WBA World Lightweight Champion. He's also a former junior lightweight champion and lightweight champion. 29 wins, no losses. 27 wins coming by knockout. He's a southpaw, 5'5.5", 67.5-inch reach. 29 years old. He's had 29 fights, 130 rounds. He's been out over a year. And I've always loved the talent of this guy. You know, he's got exceptional hand speed. He's got some power. I think his biggest weakness is himself, his outside the ring antics. It seems to be a connection with PBC fighters and Floyd Mayweather and the antics outside the ring. Just look at Adrian Broner, look at, Errol Spence Jr., and I'm sure we can find some more. But when you look at Tank Davis's record, I mean, he's got wins over Gamboa. I loved Yuriorkis Gamboa back in 2019. Leo Santa Cruz. I mean, Leo Santa Cruz was basically, ripping it up until he stepped in there with Tank Davis, beat Mario Barros, Rolando Romero, Ryan Garcia, weight-drained Ryan Garcia. He's also got wins over Cristobal Cruz, which is a tough hombre, Liam Walsh, Francisco Fonseca, and Hugo Ruiz. So, I mean, the guy's got the pedigree. There's no question about that. Nobody could ever say he didn't fight anybody, because he certainly fought everybody that was available to him. As far as Frank Martin is concerned, he's 18-0 with 12 knockouts. He too is a southpaw. Interesting, two southpaws going against each other. He's only had 18 fights, 94 rounds, 67% knockout ratio. Same age as Tank Davis, 29. He's got a 2.5-inch height advantage. He's 5'8", but ironically enough, the reach advantage is about the same. He has a 1/2 inch. The computer has him at number 8. The WBA has him ranked at number 2, IBF at number 7, and the WBC and WBO have him ranked nowhere. His best wins really were his last 2 fights. He's got a 12-round unanimous decision over Artem Haratuyan on July 15th, and he won a 12-round decision over Michael Rivera in December of 2022. And in January of 22, he also stopped Romero Dano in the 4th round. I think his lack of punching power is going to affect him. And I say lack of punching power only because when you look at his best wins of his 18 wins, they came by decision. I don't know if he's able to beat Tank Davis by decision. I can't see him outboxing Tank Davis. I mean, needless to say, I don't think it's going to be a competitive fight at all, Alex. I think that Tank Davis is going to have an exceptional performance against Frank Martin. I think it's going to be what you should expect it to be. Looking at this opponent, I'm not so sure that they should have booked this fight. But in any event, I'm picking Tank Davis in this one.
Yeah, I'm going with Davis too. I think the biggest difficulty for him is the layoff. But Martin has a similar layoff. Martin's last fight was July. So it's almost a year for him. For Davis, it is a year. So it's more than a year, 14 months. So, but I think Davis, I think I'm going to go Davis by stoppage. And, I think Davis by stoppage. I think Benavidez, I guess I'm leaning towards Benavidez by stoppage too. Someone in the chat room there, EMT Rick, mentioned, Vosdick was in the hospital after that KO to Beterbiev. So I don't know.
Most of them are.
Yeah, and hard not to be against that guy. He's fierce. He's one of the most scary punchers on earth.
The other fight I'm going to talk about is the one I'm probably going to be watching. It's on Peacock, Saturday afternoon, 1:30. Gotta love those 1:30 ones. But it's a cruiserweight world title fight. The champion is Chris Billum Smith.
Oh yeah, that fight. Yeah.
He's a WBO world cruiserweight champ, and he's going to be taking on Richard Rakoporhi. And Rakoporhi is a pretty decent fighter. He's ranked number 4 in the world by the computer. The WBO has him ranked at number 1, and he's not ranked at all in the other sanctioning bodies. He's got 77 rounds, 51 less than his opponent. He's got just about a 76% knockout ratio, which is actually about 10% higher than his opponent. He's 34 years old, a year older. He's 2 inches taller at 6'5". He's got a 77-inch reach. His best wins as a pro, Krzysztof Glowacki. He beat him 4th round stoppage in January of last year. He also stopped Fabio Turchi in June of 22, 2nd round. And another fight I wanted to mention was Jack Massey, which was a pretty tough opponent. 12-round unanimous decision in 2019. 17-0 with 13 knockouts is Rakoporhi's record. Now he steps in the ring with Chris Billum Smith. His record is 19 wins, 13 coming by knockouts, same amount of knockouts, and he's got 1 loss. His only loss came at the hands of Richard Ryak Porhi in 2019. He's got 128 rounds, 51 more rounds than his opponent. Like I said, he's got a 68% KO ratio, 10% less. He's a year younger. He's 2 inches shorter at 6'3". He's currently the WBO champion. His best wins, really, he beat Masternak. He stopped him in 8 rounds. He also beat Lawrence Oakley by a majority decision, and Oakley ended up moving up to heavyweight. And he too has a win over Isaac Chamberlain. And they do have a bunch of similar opponents on their resumes. Who do I think is going to win? It's a tough one for me to pick, to be honest with you. But for some reason, I'm thinking that Ryak Porhi is going to take this fight. You could look at it like Bill M. Smith wants to avenge his loss and everything else. But I don't know. There's something about Ryak Porhi that I just think, even though they have the same amount of knockouts, I'm just leaning towards him in this particular fight. So maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. It's a 50-50 shot, but I'm picking Ryak Porhi to become the new WBO cruiserweight champion. Your thoughts, please.
Yeah, I'm going to go with a 50-50 fight there, Bill. And I do think that I'm glad that I didn't realize that was a televised card, that's on Peacock. That between that card and the DAZN card, there might be enough boxing on for me to not feel bad about missing the Gervonta Davis card. Because I don't think I'm going to part with $70 for that.
Me neither. It's just not. It's not worth it.
Yeah, I really would love to see those fights, but I'm not doing that again.
No,
and I think my man Pietro will be happy. We'll have lots of boxing. My cat son Pietro, he sits there with me and watches all the fights, so he'll be happy. He'll be happy there's that much boxing on.
As long as he just doesn't start, slapping you around, and he's got to remember, keep the claws in. No claws. No claws. I have 2 emails I want to read from my main man, Brett. They're both from the same guy. One I missed. He put this on before the show last week. He says, ABC, I'm a subscriber number 10 on Rumble. Hey, listen, we're now on Rumble. We're trying to build an audience there, so I appreciate Brett subscribing, but I want you guys to subscribe too. He says, I'm totally with you on the UK boxing scene. I love these cards in Saudi Arabia. I really hope we don't see Wilder anymore, as I think next time out he's going to get seriously hurt. When I heard that his father was pushing him to just get a new trainer and keep going, that bothered me. I think Deontay Wilder should hang him up. He should be financially set for the rest of his life. So he said, I just want to say you made an excellent point about Dubois today and how he's not ready to face somebody like AJ. In that fight against Hrgovic, he was getting hit a lot, and someone like Joshua really hurt him at this point. As a big fan, as a big fight as it would be right now in the UK, I hope it doesn't happen quite yet, because AJ needs a fight soon, and it seems to make good business sense. Excuse me. Also, great points about the Broner-Hobbs fight. Well, I was wrong, Brett. Hobbs won the fight, but in any event, he says, I can't wait to see Bruce Shushu Carrington on ESPN. I didn't watch that fight, but I heard it wasn't that impressive. Shushu was more of a Shushan, but and then Brett.
I thought it was decent. He didn't. It seemed like he could have turned it up. I think the movement gave him difficulties.
One of my buddies, Sherman Henson, who's congratulations to Sherman. He's being inducted into the Florida Boxing Hall of Fame next weekend. He wasn't impressed, but the last email from Brett says, I saw the YouTube yesterday about Usyk and Fury, and I think the rematch will happen because there's too much money to be made, and the public wants to see the first fight. If I'm Usyk, I go hang out at the bar and then get into a fight. Did you see the clip of Tyson Fury in the bar?
No.
He was plastered. He couldn't even walk. And watching a 6'7" guy trying to be helped out with guys that he's leaning on was kind of funny. Then he comes out of the pub and falls down and smashes his head on the ground and everything. And basically, somebody said, "Hey, the guy was letting loose a little bit. He didn't hurt nobody except himself." But anyway, he says, was glad Zares and Carrington both won on the ESPN cards. He said the fact that Inoue was in attendance was no accident. Yeah, well, he didn't even leave. He left. The Shushu was on that card. Shushu was looking to fight Inoue. I think that was what they were hoping for. And anyway, by leaving before the end of the fight, I mean,
he watched the whole fight. He left after it.
Yeah, well, I don't think he thinks that Shushu would give him much of a chance.
I don't. Yeah.
He said, "Did you see that Lawrence Oakley offered Deontay Wilder a shot at his Bridgerweight title? Oakley can punch, and I think Wilder should just stay away and retire." I didn't hear that, but to be honest with you, if Deontay Wilder, I've always thought that Deontay Wilder should have lost a couple of more pounds and fought at cruiserweight, because that's actually a better weight for him. He would be kind of unbeatable at, well, I don't know. I shouldn't have said that. So one last thing, he said, "I got a fun fact for you. His wife Megan is from a small town called Hanover here in Ontario. When we first started to talk and we dated, she told me that. I said, 'Oh, that's so cool. The birthplace of Tommy Burns.' It'll be another guy you guys will be hearing about." She was shocked that I knew that. She said most people there don't even know that he's from there because they don't know their history, because he moved away from Hanover when he was about 2, and he lived in other little towns called Hepworth and Chelsea in the same county called Gray County. So a little small tidbit for the world champion who broke the color barrier that we discussed today, Alex, about how John L. Sullivan wouldn't do it. So any final thoughts, my man, since we're well over my time limit?
No, I think just to enjoy all the fights this weekend, and it was great to be here with you.
And catch the Tank Davis on YouTube in the morning.
Yeah, or there's always the radio.
Yeah,
if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I try not to do that, but in any event,
it's more frustrating than it is fulfilling usually.
That's why I don't do it. I don't want
many pop-ups and so many links, and it's like this one doesn't work, and this
it gets taken down, so then you got to go find another one, and then all of a sudden you find it. It's like, you missed it. This was the greatest lockout. It's like, son of a gun, But anyway,
well, I wanted to mention. I don't know if you had watched that card from the zone card from the Hall of Fame at Turning Stone. Friday. Oh, did you end up going to the Hall of Fame?
I did. I ended up not going at the last minute, and I didn't watch it too. I didn't want.
Okay.
I didn't want
it. It was Mikey Williams scored a KO, which I was glad to see, but the card itself was not that great, and the amount of technical problems they had were just staggering.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Well, I'm glad I didn't watch it, but I love watching fights at Turning Stone, and I kind of missed going there, but something else came up. I had to rearrange my sock drawer. Anyway, hey, listen, you guys, make sure you tune in next week.
Got a lot of socks.
Same bad time, same bad channel. Until then, ciao, baby.